Bonjour à tous.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Merci.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's have a nice, fascinating debate on sports and just to know if sports can contribute to peace. We just have been through a magical experience with the Olympic Games and Paralympic Games in Paris. Did you enjoy it? Raise your hand. Okay, so we pretty much all agree. This is a magical moment, but we have to go beyond this magical moment. And we often say that we shouldn't mix sports and politics. But even though that's a very political fact, and people say that sports is a war, is a confrontation, a competition, but I think it's a peaceful confrontation with rules and the possibility to go backward. And and furthermore, sports has become something very important. And as because of globalization, the first Olympic Games of 1893, we have 13 participating nations, approximately 100 athletes, and that was it. And the first Olympic Games was an addendum to the Universal Exposition, the first World Cup. I'm thinking someone who knows the World Cups. During the first World Cup, people say it's too far. Let's not go there. It was in Uruguay. I don't want to go there. We don't have much reports in the newspapers. Now we have the World Cups, we have the Olympic Games, and now the globalized massive events are counting on a massive audience, and we have three main events with a lot of TV audience. We have the World Cup, the Olympic Games, and the funerals of the Queen of England, which is not that frequent, but it's something that happens quite a lot because sports is important for pretty much everyone. Everyone can have an opinion on sports, and furthermore, sports. Well, you don't have to belong to the same country to admire an athlete, sportsman or sportswoman, but at the same time it creates some kind of, I would say, soft patriotism, as we observed during the Olympic Games in Paris, and all the foreigners were well welcome, and athletes from all around the world congratulated and shared together, they communicated together because it was a celebration of humanity because all the nations are there, and I would say all the skin colors, all the types of human beings are represented, and it's a universalism. So we have four speakers. We have Sophie Laurent, the former director of international relations of the Olympic Games Organization Committee for Paris 2024, but she also participated to the application of Paris to become the host city for the Paralympic Games and Olympic Games of 2024, and they went extremely well. We have Bernard Anselm, the former president of the French Federation of Athletics. And you actually come from Normandy and you have a long experience of this and that. We have Samuel de Croquet, the ambassador for sports. And we have ambassadors of one beautiful country called sports. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs decided that we should have an ambassador, as created by Laurent Fabius in 2016. And all French people knows Laurent Fabius very well, and we know that he's not a big fan of sports. And it was not for personal taste that he decided to have an ambassador for sports. And so we have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we have the ambassador of sports for sports. And you've been pretty much everywhere, and you were extremely busy during the Olympic Games of Paris. And now we have Lilia Thuram, the world champion, European champion of many things of football. And recently you founded a foundation to tackle racism by education. And you are here with us for this debate, so to help us living together. So I'll give the start with Sophie. And please could you tell us what about the sports? Because you know that the United Nations are pretty much the same thing as the Olympic Committee. Can we use sports as a way to contribute to peace? Good afternoon, and is fantastic to participate in this debate and to try to answer this question, to see if world sports can contribute to peace. And yes, we consider that in the framework of the United Nations, the sports is acknowledged as a big contribution to peace. And a few days ago, on 22nd of September, sport and culture were declared as contributing partners for sustainable development. And you can see that sports, from an institutional point of view, it's a huge contribution. At least it helps to contribute to this sustainable development. In the Olympic movement, we often say that sports help us to 11 of the sustainable development goal. And what the main sustainable development goal is number 11, and it states that thanks to sport we can have more peaceful, more open cultures and societies. Why do I say that? Because when we talk about more open society, well, this is the motto of the Olympic Games of Paris. We wanted to organize, and we organized the most open Olympic Games. Was open in terms of diversity, about how we meet each other, open because of the number of countries participated, open with open stadiums. We wanted to make sure that these Olympic Games will be completely open in its diversity. So obviously, thank you, Pascal. Sports is really a contributing factor for peace, not only to solve conflicts, but would be miracle solution, but at least it brings something important to individuals mostly, because it brings values, tolerance, respect. And if you can make them yours, it will help you to acknowledge and recognize the others, and can have a more peaceful world. And during the games, we have a very specific location. It's the Olympic Village, and this Olympic Village, uh, Jean-Claude Killy once said that the world's a village, and the village is the world. In this Olympic Village, we have many delegations, and they live together peacefully. We cannot completely forget all the conflicts all around the world. We're trying to make sure that meetings can happen, that nations, athletes who hate each other, at one point when it's about uh, to live together, they can share something, they can share the same environment, you can give them the necessary conditions so they can do better performances. So the Olympic Games, we talk about the truces, everything, but it allows us to. I'll give you the floor. Thank you, Bernard. And Salem said you shouldn't mix politics with sport, but what do you think about this statement that we shouldn't mix sport and politics? Well, I disagree with this. Sports is politics. It's not, I would say, political politics. It's more used to strategic meaning of the word. We can use sport to have specific policies, because what you can see that sport, just like in the Olympic Games, can contribute to peace. They can bring joy and happiness to the population, even though before the Olympic Games people were more skeptical, and the media so also skeptical. And you saw that the stadiums were full. The atmosphere was amazing. We relearned to share, to respect each other. So these values are not used enough from the political point of view. In order to do so, we should have more ambitious sports policies. There have limited number of countries who do so. So it's important. High-level competitions are important, but sport is how to create relationships between people, how can educate children at school, and we don't have enough sport at school. For example, half an hour every week. What do you do during 30 minutes? Not much. WHO recommends at least 1 hour of sport every day, and we should do more. And some municipalities already do this in primary schools. 15% of municipalities organize sports at school. And so sport is health. For me, it's medicine. And I can tell you that sport is even better than medicine. What did we do to people suffering from Alzheimer disease? Not in France, because unfortunately it was always lagging behind. We do them, we ask them to do some boxing. They train to box. And what happens in Canada where they do this? Well, 2 years later, they managed to get some brain cells back. They managed to get their memory back. Why don't we do this in France? And you see that it's a medicine. It's even cheaper than the real medicine. It can be even more efficient than the medicine. We talk about the Alzheimer's disease, but can talk about other diseases because we considered approximately 47 diseases, and you see that people, cancer, are getting cured, getting better. So I'm not telling you that we shouldn't take medicines. I'm not telling you this, but sport is an investment. When you spend money in sport, is not useless. It's an investment for the future, because the more you invest in sport, and the more tomorrow we'll have generations who will behave better. They remember these values of respect and dignity. It has to be so during the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games. You manage to discover some exceptional people, high-level athletes with severe corporal issues, someone with only 1 foot, 1 leg, and they do long jump. And so sport is magic. So I think that we need to have more robust politics, most robust policies, if we can achieve peace. And sports for some small countries, when you have an athlete of a small country, can get a medal. If a young girl who won the 100-meter race comes from St. Lucie, and is a small island in the Caribbean Sea, and it's the only way to recognize a small country. And I think it's also extremely important to invest in sport at each and every level. And I've been dreaming about this since I was young, since I was a kid, honestly, is that we should do more in France. Now this overall budget for sport is 0.15%, and I hope to reach 1% of the total budget of France. So, Samuel, you're a diplomat. You worked in several countries, and now you are the official ambassador for sport. What is the role of the government, and more specifically the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, at the service of peace, and so France can be at the service of peace? What is the diplomatic dimension of sport? Thank you. I probably won't be as idealistic as Bernard, even though I completely agree, but as a diplomat, and since I also want to be realistic, the first reason why we decided to invest in diplomacy, in sport, is not for peace, but the influence of France. And we noticed after the Olympic Games in London how a country could be recognized on a global level. And France say we also want to be recognized by everyone. So you create the whole atmosphere behind the Olympic Games, as prepared by Sophie, the application, the conviction that we could actually organize such a big event. The main objective is to shine at the global level and wanted to show that France is right at the center of the world, the place where everyone interested in sport can meet, where 15,000 athletes, dozens of thousands of members of the Olympic and Paralympic family, all the NGOs, the international organizations, the UNESCO, the UNHCR, all these institutions which can, thanks to sport, have new activities. It's also extremely important, so you need to have successful Olympic Games. And a second element, because in this shining on the international level, is to also to convey some values, to important values for France. The main sports events can be propaganda tools for the worst, but for the best too. And this is what France wanted to do by organizing sustainable events, inclusive events, and show that some ideals were hidden behind, and no longer hidden behind the Olympic Games. And what I wanted to highlight is that to comment on what Pascal just said, that these Olympic Games were magical, but I just need to show it was not only magic. It was just like a magical moment. I often use this expression of magical moment too often, but it was a reality, and that will be our collective challenge in the coming months and years, including in the network of 165 embassies. We wanted to use sport as a way to spread our influence, how we could help so we can have a better understanding of our counterparts, how we can meet all of the other parties, and we can actually to understand how the others work. And I think how can we understand the others if we don't understand what our traditions are? Because we do sport pretty much everywhere, and I consider that the diplomats have this task of understanding sport and to make sure that it can bring people together thanks to sport. Thank you very much.
Lilian, la pacification des relations,
Lilian, the peaceful relationships is also important for individual relationships. So, how do you think your long career in sport was a good way to make things easier for everyone? Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone's doing okay. Are you good shape? We always need to ask ourselves if you're in good shape and if you're feeling all right. So, talking about sport, first and foremost, why should we do sport? Because do sport is a good way to get to know yourself, to be aware of yourself. And generally speaking, was lucky to be a very high level sportsman. And I think that what brings us together, these are emotions. So for example, during the Olympic Games, when you're in the stadium, you look at the final of blind football and you have emotions. We are French people, Frenchman, French woman, we support our team. But I think that emotions are essential. And this is why I think uh, leads us to think about how we can live together, how we can share these emotions. And I would say that what's important is to educate each and every one of us, each sportsman, sportwoman, so they can make their voices heard. So to tackle violence, for example, when we talk about racism, a lot of sportsmen and sportwomen will lead to changes in our society. For example, I'm a president of a foundation, but if I'm the president of a foundation tackling injustice because I was educated thanks to the history of various athletes, like for example Muhammad Ali, high-level athletes who took the advantage of having an emotional link with the audience to tackle injustice in society. So what I do tell you to sportsmen and sportswomen, don't be afraid to raise your voice, because an athlete can educate a huge number of young people, mostly, so we can change our vision to have more respect, to go beyond your background, your religion, etc. And what I learned by football is that what's absolutely crucial is we can understand that you belong to a team when you work in when you are a team member. It's always interesting. It's interesting because you always work for the same team, and I think that the high level athletes are an important role to play in order to create a more fairer, just society. And you have the will to do something together. Is what's important is to work together, and I think it's essential for us to understand that we are not only rational beings but also emotional beings, and sport is essential to build a better society. And we saw that during the Olympic Games. It was just absolutely incredible. It was interesting during the Olympic Games, and I don't know if you've noticed that, but when I was young, a bit younger, obviously I'm not familiar with all the types of sports, but I ended up watching a match because there was a French participant, and I ended up supporting this competitor because we have this emotional link with them, and I think sport can allow us to get closer, emotionally speaking, and create a more peaceful society.
Sophie, quand tu as travaillé
Sophie, when you contributed uh, to this victory in September 2017, when the Olympic Committee granted the Olympic Games to Paris, uh, what was the kind of work of influence did you do to make sure? And in 2013, after three failures, after Barcelona, Beijing, and London, so what did we do? What did we change in on the international level in order to win these Olympic Games? Now it's time to disclose all the secrets of our application. Well, Pascal, indeed, when we started, when I was hired in 2015, first of all, we have a collective approach. It was a collective adventure. We worked together. We worked on all our failures and our shortcomings. Why didn't we manage to win the Olympic Games in 2005, for example? So, for example, in 2005, we were convinced that we would get the Olympic Games of 2012. We didn't get them for many reasons. One of the main reasons, because it was when we would probably necessarily have the Olympic Games even before the votes. So we try to change our position, our approach. We try to analyze the many reasons of why we failed. Why, and first of all, Denis Tanguay, the president of Paris 2024, is that we always win with our strength. We can always improve our weaknesses, but we need to focus on our strong points because we win with our strong points. First of all, we have a very nice case. Cannot A country can no longer organize Olympic Games and Paralympic Games if it doesn't make sense. This organization of the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games must be beneficial to the society. So you must have a legacy afterwards. So we have a very compact case with fewer infrastructure, with but innovations. The first time we have sport outside of the stadiums, so we have the urban stadium at La Concorde. but we also have Olympic route, and Paris would be the Olympic route. We wanted to have sports pretty much everywhere in France, even including surfing in Tahiti. So we have an amazing case. We wanted to be innovative and creative, something that will make a difference with our competitors. We used pretty much the same expression. We wanted to break the codes and break the mold, and we changed our methodology. Lobbying methodology. Lobbying is an English word, and sometimes we don't really understand what it means in French. But we say lobbying means in French like international promotion. We started with 5 applications from 5 cities. Some of them withdrew, like for example Budapest, because for reasons of votes, and then Boston, because the population was not really in favor of having these Olympic Games. So we always have the idea of testing and trying to understand what the population of Paris wanted. And then we have Rome for political reasons. And finally, we ended up with 2 cities, Los Angeles and Paris. And something happened that we shouldn't forget. At that time, the voters were the members of the Olympic Committee. We have approximately 100 members, and we needed to convince them. And to convince them, we needed to understand them and to understand why France could host the Olympic Games better than Los Angeles, and we need to understand their expectations. Some of were athletes, so we have to develop necessary arguments to tell them that the athletes will be warmly welcome in the best conditions to achieve the best performances. Although we're heads of international federations, so we understand the specific characteristics of each sport and what it will be important, and others are presidents of Olympic committees, and we highlighted discussions and exchanges with other countries. So we developed an array of arguments, and we worked closely with the diplomatic network, which allowed us to work with Samuel. So we developed these strong points. And we also gave some necessary arguments and strong points to support this sport movement and to our collaborators so they could support and convey strong messages. And we worked as a team because we had what we call sport movement, diplomacy, the mayor of Paris. We have a list of characters supporting the cause, and we worked on concentric circles of influence to convince the necessary voters. Do you want me to mention the 24-28 race?
We end up in a system where the CIO says, why should we have win-win-win? Why do we have the system win-win-win? Well, it's probable that Paris could win for 2024, 28, or Los Angeles could win 24, 28, and the CIO will be winning because they'll have 2 extraordinary cities for the development of the Olympic and Paralympic Games. So the race, at one moment, the contest at one moment reoriented not towards who is going to have 2024 and only 2024, but who would be 2024 and who would be 2028. And there, of course, this was a really the very intense candidature. We said because of double attribution 2017, we're sure that Paris and Los Angeles would win, but for which year? And there you had to develop other arguments to explain that, yes, indeed, Paris in 2024, it's the only choice. There would be no other system because Paris would not be a candidate for 2028. And so there's been different moments of the candidacy. A key moment in Lausanne, in Switzerland, where we somehow pulled our trump card of international promotion. We asked our president, Macron, to come and to convince one after the other, the members of the CIO, to give them this extra asset to saying that France was the best. This moment, we came out winning compared to Los Angeles. The CIO convinced Los Angeles to take 2028. LA didn't want. There was a bit of rope pull in the background, and we knew at the end of the summer that Paris was going to have 2024, Los Angeles 2028, and the whole was then announced on the 17th of September 2017. So you know everything about the dealings and goings on the CIO level, how you get Olympic Games. Bernard, you spoke about the interest of the politics, and there's a state that plays its role, but you've been a mayor. Local authorities always have an important role to play in the actual organization of the sport, and without the local authorities, sport would not be what it would be. How does the coordination get on between the national and the decentralized level for the sport to organize the sport? Yes, indeed. Local authorities, in terms of financial means provided to the sports for building stadiums and things like that, that is 15 billion per year. When the state, I'm not taking this year's budget of the Olympic Games, that was above the norm, but when the state only put about 850 million per year. So you see the difference is huge. Without local authorities, there would not be sports in France. Also want to remind the sports is lots requiring on volunteer. The 3,500,000 volunteers within the different sports clubs. If there wasn't these volunteers, the entire this is the civil society sector where there's most people. If there wasn't all these volunteer commitment, because without these people working in the field, passionate, that will deal with the team training and teaching, organizing, logistics every weekend, because usually the competitions are usually the weekends. Without the volunteers, it would be complicated. I just wanted to add, I'm also part of civil society movement, and we try to calculate what the volunteering represents in terms of financial contribution. All associations together. So I'm vice president of the associate movements, where I represent the sports, because there's all types of incorporated societies in all areas. Each year, if we had to pay these people, the time spent, we've evaluated the activity at these so the specialized economists who did this. This is 70% of the French GDP, 1,750 billions per year. This is what the volunteering offers to the society. If it wasn't that, then our society would have far more economical problems. So you need to think about that, and maybe better recognize volunteering in the coming years. We've made some propositions with the Olympic Committee, but for the moment they have not been taken into account. More position for a better recognition, a better legal help for the people who take responsibilities and who commit or maybe be able to have a contribution to their retirement fund in order to thank them for their efforts. Sadly, for the moment, none of these propositions have been taken up. Without the collectivities, without the network of volunteers, there wouldn't be any sports in France. The relationship with the state, of course, it's important, because the state works more with high-level sports. The federations, there are public delegation authorities. Federations, of course, they also have public service missions. They also have frameworks. They also have technical managers that are paid by the state, that are being provided by the Minister of Sports. And of course, without all this, the sports federations would not be able to work. So, of course, depending on the importance of the federation and the means allocated to the federations, we can have slightly more management, but it's only the big federations that can pay these kind of have these kind of means. we need to build the culture of sports, having more focus on the sport. Sport needs to be a national priority, particularly with what happened during the Olympic Games, the Paralympic Games. This really needs to be a priority because sport can also be a tool for diplomacy. It can also be a universal language. We have seen teams from all over the world. They're going to compete to win, and then they're going to hug. And you don't see that anywhere else. You only see that with sports. We've even seen in some competition, we've seen North Koreans hugging the South Korean. That is actually illegal based in the context of these two countries. So we only see that in sports. And we also need to invest in sports with local authorities, help the local authorities more. Local authorities, they are the main financiers, but they have more and more financial management issues. They have problem completing their budget. We also probably need to create more space between the collectivities, if the state participates in the financing of the infrastructures, but it's really the local authority that spends most money on this. So we need maybe more links, more consistency between the two, and have a bigger discussion on the territorial organization of the sport. For the past 20 years, we have been working with intercommunality, with conurbations, metropolis, all that. But we're still working on organization on where very localized sports commitment. Maybe we should widen, mutualize on the territories, have a wider scope of federation for sports action. Some already do it for the infrastructures, but not for the functioning of the sports club and federation. Maybe we need to think about this more for the results and the investments of all the partnerships in sports. This is what I wanted to add. Thank you, Bernard. Samuel, your job is fairly new. It's only been existing for 11 years. Has the Minister of Foreign Affairs, have they integrated the sports in their diplomatic work? And has the Ministry of Foreign Affairs integrated the sport for a very long time? There was in the diplomatic circles, there was they were looking down upon the sport, saying, yeah, that was kind of a secondary thing. It was kind of the choice between the muscles and the brain, and you need the brains but no muscles. Has this changed, this attitude? There was no ambassador conference this year. Your colleague in the different jobs where you go have integrated the fact that now there is the economical diplomacy, the cultural diplomacy, but there's also the sports diplomacy. Thank you, Pascal. Well, I'm going to use this expression. I really have this feeling that within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they're having a sports coming out. They finally came out of the closet. Today, it's not taboo for an ambassador to say, I like sports and I actually practice sports. And I want to say this jokingly, but a couple of years ago, I think that was not necessarily easy for an ambassador to publish on his newsletter, on the communication tool or via Telegram, the fact that he went to the end game of the Emirates Cup or the Federation, Football Federation or Rugby Federation. While today we know that it's absolutely part of their daily routine. It's absolutely unavoidable to invest this domain of sport in order to win an influence. I'm very realistic in my quality of because if you invest this area of sports, you're going to have a specifically influent audience. You're going to talk about presidents of federation who are sometimes ministers, who are maybe somewhere linked to the powers in place, and it's with this sports vector that you are going to develop your network. This is here my advice to look at the civil society, the audience, and the actors with which we interact. as Bernard was saying, the volunteers, the supporters, the ones who really live those emotions thanks to the sport. That's all of us. And if we want to project a more modern image, a more original image of our countries, we need to invest other areas of action, and sport is part of that. As a diplomat, even if though the Minister of Europe and Foreign Affairs is really leading the external action of the state, but they haven't got the monopoly of the international relations. The territorial collectivities, they have international, thanks to decentralized cooperation. The football clubs, soccer clubs, they are actors of external relations because they participate in a certain number of international and regionals and worldwide competitions. The companies, of course, so maybe our added value, which we have by investing this world of sports, is to bring together all these dynamics, create links between these actors, and to project either an image of power or the values that I think it is absolutely unavoidable that we do this. And I think that will be my mission in the coming year, because the Games of Paris 2024 are physically behind us, but they're still very present in the spirits. And when I see a volunteer here bag, I mean, I've lived a common adventure, which I want to really continue with this community of volunteers. And I want to continue it on the field, but not also at the international level. Thank you. Yeah, things have changed. Since the beginning of the 19th, Jacques Delors, who was the Minister of Finance, who said that the first newspaper read in the morning is the sports newspaper. Équipe. People said, how can he waste his money or time reading reading a sports newspaper? Liliam, yes, in a team there's people from all over the world. How do people play one against the other? You play with Fabien Cannavaro in Turin, and then you play against him in national teams. How do you deal with this? And you played in different countries. You've been traveling around for games in the Faroe Islands, in the most incredible places. No, Faroe is not strange at all. That's not what you said back then. I think there was a problem with the plane that was slightly stuck. Does the first contact with the sports, is it not a opening? We discover all because other teams are playing, because we see other people, and maybe is the competition not a way of opening up to the others? I mean, it should start when you're a kid, just listening to the other. There should be far more sports in school. And collective sport, team sports, because when you play in a team with other people, when you train with other people, you realize that indeed, if you had any biases, these biases fall off because you end up knowing the other. And what is interesting is that to win, indeed, because when you are in a team, when you're playing in a team, you train to win, and then you're going to very quickly understand that you need the other to win, and that the other is actually playing with others, actually making you better. The other helps you become better. What is interesting in team sport is that generally in society, we would like to be at our disposal, while in team sports, you need to be at the disposal of your team. And I think that this form of humility, of humbleness, allows you to go easier towards the other when you step out of the framework of the sports. And well, I mean, I was born in the Caribbean, and then I worked in the Paris region, then I went to Monaco, then I went to Italy, to Spain. Well, what is interesting in the world of football is that you meet people, different people. You need to learn the language, and it works out. And I think that is really what's missing in our society, is the fact that we do together, things together. And sport, and there's another area which I like very much, is the music. So when you play in a band together, you need to listen to the others. You need to play together with others. And team sport is exactly the same. when you watch a football game, you need to be listening to your other team members when you play in a football game, and in order to take the ball or intervene when it's needed. I arrived in Italy, and as you was mentioning earlier, Fabio Cannavaro, he became a brother to me. While in the beginning I didn't know him, he's from Naples, and what is interesting in this team sport, you spend time together, and this time spent together allows you to connect emotionally to the others. And I think that in the issue of racism, there is this incapacity to be perceived as being part of the same group. Because indeed, as we all lived in societies that built on racialization, on ethnicizations, we are still locked in mental categories, and team sports allow you to go beyond that, to break out of these categories, and you can actually see in the French national teams, or in the French national team, Olympic teams, nobody is looking at what is the skin color of the athlete, what is the religion of the athlete. So suddenly, well, he's French, he's playing in the French team and he's French, and the team sport really fosters this knowledge and this obligation of getting out of your comfort circle. Because indeed, when you're in a group, when you're playing in a team, you need to make the effort to actually be part of a group, and you will be accepted. And there's also something very interesting, as I said earlier, it's the emotions that you are going to share. Winning together is something extraordinary, but losing together is also extraordinary, because at this moment when you are in the changing rooms, you see you're sad, you need to comfort the other one, you need to protect yourself on the coming game. That's very important. And what you said, when you play during the week with team members, and then you meet them during games with your country, well, since you know that person, you know those team players, you actually see the game differently. There is lots more respect. I remember that's actually a game we lost in the end game of the World Cup 2018. I was really very unhappy, you can imagine. I was really angry. 2006, sorry. No, sorry. In 2006, against Italy, we lost against Italy. Because there's always a rivalry between France and Italy, particularly in the football. And we lost that end game. Yes, that's the famous, I'm not going to mention it yet. Let's skim over this dark moment in football history. And I was in the change room. I was completely silent. I didn't want to talk to anyone. We got into the bus. And Cannavaro comes towards me with a big smile on his face and he says, Lilian, honestly, you won the World Cup in '98. You can be happy. Am I still your friend? And that changed everything. It changed everything because, yes, indeed, okay, we lost. What do you want to change? But I can also be happy for my friend Cannavaro, because I know that he won the World Cup, and I remember how happy I was when I was 1998. How happy I was to win the World Cup. Football creates fraternity. Sport creates fraternity, and if we talk about peace today, it's because we need to be considering ourselves as brothers and sisters. We need to get out of the categories and nationality and understand that on the other team, on the other side, there's human people like us. And that's why it is important that you play in team sports, that you watch team sports, that you share sports with friends, because it's exactly the same when you watch a football game. Well, sometimes you are a supporter of a certain team, your friend supports another team, but at the end of the game, you're still friends. You still have beers together and you shared moments of emotion.
Lilian, je me permets de rebondir.
If I could get back on this issue, that seems extremely interesting for me. We have lots of things to learn. We civil servants from the athletes' That's why we try, at least we're not to support all these NGOs, all these athletes that are engaged in all these causes who, thanks to sport, manage to do miracles, things that we as diplomats would never be able to do, but particularly because this is part of the objectives of the sustainable development, to achieve objectives that are really honorable, like stopping domestic violence, like stopping inequalities between men and women, where the sports athletes are really promoters, ambassadors, which we need to work with. We need to absolutely support. And I'm thinking of this because there was a tragical event, sorry to mention that, after the 2024 Olympic Games. There was this young Ugandan athlete who was assassinated by her life partner in Kenya. And, this really shocked many people. It did not just reveal, and it just not just got people aware about domestic violence. It also highlighted a certain number of causes these associations in Kenya and elsewhere fighting against domestic violence thanks to sports. And I'm thinking of this association that's called Teardrops Angels, that is in Kenya, and it was created after another feminicide of an athlete, a Kenyan athlete, and that thanks to the engagement of the athletes, allowed to have a much wider support. And today, if this athlete, Kenyan and Woman athlete Joan Chelimo, they come in support of this association, is thanks to the fact that she's known and her capacity of raising her voice and being listened to around the world in the media. And I think that this field, when you said that athletes need to liberate their voices and not be afraid of speaking and promoting peace, I think that we, as actors of the sports world, we need to, of course, support these type of initiatives that is absolutely indispensable for the peace of the world and the sustainable development that we all want to see become reality. Last topic before we open for questions very quickly, Sophie. Has there been geopolitical tensions which for Paris 2024, and if yes, how were they resolved? Well, any country that organizes Olympic and Paralympic Games inherits the political and economic and social and cultural context. So, of course, Paris 2024 was the same, did not avoid this context. You can understand there has been terrible disputes and discussions. There's been economical context, difficulties, huge inflation, geopolitical tensions. We inherited a huge conflicts, Israel-Palestine, the invasion Ukraine by Russia, and let's not forget all the other conflicts around the world, on the African continent and elsewhere, with huge tragedies linked to climate change. And yes, we had to make do with this ecosystem around us. Our will, one of the wills we had of the leaders of Paris 2024, is really to organize as pacific as possible Paralympics and Olympic Games in terms of security, so that these games be as safe as possible. As far as the Olympic Village is concerned, also, there was we had to work with the different delegations, so that when the Israeli delegations meets the Palestinian delegation, that all goes well as possible. But there was not just that. There's all the other conflicts. Armenia and Azerbaijan, Sudan, South Sudan, and we realized that within the world there's lots of fractures, and within the Olympic Village, when we bring all these conflicts together, there's lots of possibilities of conflicts. Well, I can tell you something. There's not been any conflicts in the village. There was 0 incidents linked to all these geopolitical conflicts. And getting back to what you said, Lilian, yes, I think the sports athletes, they have another vision of the world. They But the competition, j'ai pas compris. Doing the competition in the stadiums, there's been issues, there's been slightly complicated moments to manage. When did you know that in the stadium some flags are authorized, other not? Those that are authorized are those of the nations, which are necessary of the countries, neither of the movements. So there's been a resolution in 1981 saying that the country of Taiwan cannot be displayed during the Olympic Games. So it's the flag of Chinese Taipei. Not easy to explain to Taiwanese fans that their flag cannot be displayed. Same thing for Tibet, impossible. And so we had to manage to take them away from some supporters. Not easy. Israeli could be displayed, Palestinian could be displayed, but not other nations. That required some diplomatic initiatives to remove them. And then we had mistakes, some mistakes. We did some of them. I mean, when we raised the country, we got the wrong country, the wrong flag. The national hymn, we hit the wrong button, and so national anthem, the wrong national anthem was played. These are technical human mistakes, so we had to catch up with that. So we had to discussions and apologize with the governments, with the right letters, with the ambassadors, call presidents, call kings and queens in order to apologize deeply. But globally, we managed to handle this, and we've really all went through formidable rules. I remember the ambassador of Korea, the fact that there was a mistake. He understood that the mistakes are human. Bernard, there's many young people here today. There's a crisis of sports. There's less people, young people doing sports. Is it because they're too busy? It's too tiring? What are you saying to young people to push them to be more active in sports? There's not less people doing so. According to statistics of the French Athletic Federation, there was, of course, the COVID, but that affected all the sports. But then we had, of course, the figure again of the number of licensees, which we had. We had over 300,000 licensees. As far as the young people are concerned, what we have proposed is to do sports differently, practice sports differently from the traditional sports. We invented 27 workshops in forms of games where you run, you jump, and you throw. We don't say that it's weight throwing or running or track and field. And we do games. We do. So these workshops, they are for the very young people, very young kids. I would say primary school age. We even started in daycare centers. So we start with daycare centers, and then the primary schools, and then the higher schools, and then with junior high schools or with primary school 5-7, we start going to more classical sports types. But this policy was implemented a couple of years ago, of activities linked to with the age of the kids. And today we see that there is a bigger sustainability in the licensees and the commitment of these young people in terms of athletics, of course, after a certain age, when they're teenagers or beyond teenage, or between 16 and 18 years old. We have athletes who are going to do other sports. Why? Because, of course, the jumpers, they're also excellent volleyball players. So the French volleyball team, half of the people in the French volleyball team, they are jumpers also. Because for volleyball, this is important. Handball, half of the French national team of the handball, they come from athletics. Among these players, there's javelin launchers, because of course this is an arm movement, but there's also jumpers, because you need to try to jump very high, so you can also throw the ball better. So we feed into lots of other sports. Rugby, here it's more weight throwers or disc throwers, or other sports which we feed into. This has always been the case, and we're not worried at all. We're actually proud. From the girl that won the triathlon at the Olympic Games. She comes from the athletic field, and we were very proud of her victory, even though in one of the athletics she was one of the best of her age, but then she went on to win in triathlon. So we're very proud to feed into all the sports, but also a big part of team sports. We don't feed into football, but almost all the other sports: basketball, volleyball, handball, rugby. not so much the football. So actually, athletics, it's a basic sports. I mean, jumping, running, and throwing. That is feeds into all the sports. It's normal that we then end up in all the other sports, and that is actually a very good thing.
Samuel,
Thank you, Samuel. Quickly, let's take the questions so then we can give the floor to the audience. We see a multipolarization of the world. Isn't that the same thing for sports? Because we see many more competitors, many more nations now being fully involved in sport. Is sport a new field of diplomatic competition so everyone can exist in the eyes of the rest of the world? And the answer is yes. Very brief question and very brief answer. Yes, indeed, we have a competition. And it's a real competition, as Sophie said, on the path to Paris 2024 with the four other competing cities. But I think it's quite healthy to have such a competition around the world when we organize high-level events. Just imagine when you have three countries allowed to organize the Olympic Games, that we keep on giving each other the same Olympic Games. Well, we get the feeling that they get confiscated. And it was something already mentioned. It was a reproach made to Western countries. And this idea is always highlighted in what we do. To be the first Arab country to organize the World Cup, the first Asian country to organize the Rugby World Cup, to be the first African country to organize the Youth Olympic Games in 2026. Well, this is something that this is considered favorably because we can all organize the Olympic Games, but when we start the competition, well, it's fair play. So what we see now is that even during this competition, we see some collaboration. If now India, which is almost candidate for the Olympic Games of 2036, it's because they want to cooperate. They want to learn what was done well in France.
Faire, y compris avec les pays.
And we did a lot of good things. I think it's important that we might have a healthy competition between countries, and it should also lead to a healthy cooperation so they can go in the same direction. We have sustainable and Olympic Games because it's a sine qua non condition for the survival of these massive events to preserve peace.
Lilian, vous êtes toujours engagé. Quand vous étiez joueur, vous preniez...
So Lilian, you're always a fully committed player. Even in 2007, we visited some camps for children's soldiers and in West Africa. So do you think that sportsmen and sport people, athletes, are frequently committed and involved in these? Do you think you could be pioneers and you can actually use your reputation for the good causes? Well, I hope so.
Qui prennent la parole par rapport à ma génération. Donc ça veut dire c'est
Okay, there's many more sportsmen and sportswomen athletes which just want to express themselves, and compared to my generation. And it's also extremely important. And I also think that the federations should educate the athletes so they can raise their voice.
Allô, allô.
If tomorrow, if you're high-level athletes, because historically, forbid athletes,
En fait, il ne faut pas mélanger.
you see, we shouldn't mix sports with politics. Well, sports is something political, and you can remind the athletes, raise your voice. And when you raise your voice, well, the people will try to, they legitimize your words. Some sponsors may not want to work with you.
Mais en fait, ce qui est le plus important dans la vie, c'est à savoir, est-ce que vous devez faire ce qui...
They need to understand what is important in life. And once you realize that history proved that when athletes, men or women, raise the voice and make the voice heard, well, the world is become fairer, and you need to take the time to speak out. And young people, don't wait to become athletes before raising your voice and before speaking out.
Que si vous ne prenez pas la parole,
Because if you don't speak out, it means you're not neutral, because when you talk about neutrality and justice, neutrality doesn't exist. If you don't speak out, it means that you're not bothered by injustice. So you shouldn't be neutral, you should speak out. And I hope in the future, and I really encourage my children to speak out.
Merci. Nous avons encore 20 minutes. Vous avez, je pense...
We still have 20 minutes left, so I think we have microphones in the audience. So I don't see them, but if anyone has a microphone, you can actually stand up, introduce yourself, and ask a question.
Moi, d'ici, on ne voit pas très bien, donc... Alors, allez-y, celui qui a le micro, celui ou celle qui a le micro pose la question.
So if you have the microphone, you can ask a question. But introduce yourself first. Bonjour, good afternoon. My name is Lina. I had a question for Mrs. Laurent. And I was curious because you mentioned something previously. A few months ago. Please stand up. Yeah, it's so much better. Yes, great. How would you see that some nations, non-recognized by the United Nations, and France, like Palestine and Kosovo, participated to the Olympic Games? First of all, how do you consider this from the geopolitical point of view? And do you think it's more like a activist style of movement? And what would be the role of the IOC? And what role could it play for the recognition of future states? Thank you very much. It's actually a very interesting question. Thank you very much. We need to make a distinction between the Olympic world and the political world. And we need to know they have more delegations, national delegations in this Olympic world compared to the number of countries recognized by the UN. I'll give you an element of answer. So, for example, for the IOC, for one specific territory, we need to have a certain number of federations organized together, and they decide on one point and they apply to the IOC to participate to these Olympic Games. That's what happened for Kosovo. As soon as they created this new state, whatever the recognition by the United Nations or not, whether they were entitled to apply to belong to this Olympic world. And so I think in Kosovo we have 7 federations, and now Kosovo is a delegation like any others, and they participate like any other delegation. The same for Palestine. And the latest delegation which joined the Olympic world was the delegation of South Sudan, with an amazing basketball team which almost was on the podium of the best basketball teams. And second question about recognition. Well, it would be interesting to listen to Pascal, but from the IOC point of view, there's a true will, an Olympic ideal So make sure that all nations can participate in this Olympic Games. But we have fewer Paralympic delegations compared to Olympic delegations, but this is our ideal. And we need to make sure have a worldwide competition, yes. Just to add, because we have the popular China and we also have Hong Kong, which is a distinct delegation. We still have the Olympic team for Hong Kong, but Taiwan is not at the UN, but Taiwan is at IOC. So we have more members because we are on the right to veto. So we cannot prevent Kosovo from belonging to the Olympic world. We can actually veto the membership of Kosovo at the United Nations, but you cannot do this at the IOC. So I would say the IOC have much more power, shall I say, because they have to accept this nation. And this is why the veto right is inexistent in the IOC. So this is why we have better representation. We have 206 delegations compared to approximately 193 countries at the United Nations. So Kosovo doesn't belong to the United Nations, but since we cannot veto any application, so it's wider. Let's take another question.
Allez-y, allez-y. Bah allez-y, je ne sais pas qui a le micro, mais allez-y.
So if you have a microphone near you, please take it, stand up, introduce yourself, and let's go. Good afternoon, and you said, rightfully so, that we make a distinction between the sport world and the political world, but the sport is highly political. Mr. Thuram rightfully said that each and every one of us should raise a voice and speak out to show there's discriminations of violence, and the sportsmen and sportswomen should be, and supporters should also be beyond reproach. And the question is also about the governance and some decision makers. I was happy to work in the sport world, and some say perverse behaviors, and some federations may be shocked. And my question is, can this concept of virtuous governance be one of the priorities of the Ministry of Sport to convey a positive message? Thank you very much for your answer.
Alors, merci pour la...
Well, thank you very much for your question, and it's a very important topic, very relevant nowadays. Indeed, the statute was created in the 60s after the Olympic Games in Rome. So it's important to make it evolve, and this relationship with the Ministry of Sport should evolve too. I think that the status should evolve so they are in line with our current society. So I drafted a report in 2016 for the National Sports Council, which no longer exists, and I want to shake things up with this, to have a cooperative society of collective interest, SCIC in French. And SCIC is like a company, a type of company in France. So we wanted this to be included in the Sport Act of 2022. It was voted, and will come into force next year, because by the end of 2024 we have to renew and re-elect all the members of the decision-making bodies. So it's going to take more time. It's a more democratic approach. Everyone is fully represented. The the public partners, the private partners, everyone is duly represented. And the shareholders are not paid. All the benefits are reinvested in their federation, and it's a good way to acknowledge the organization of each sport, because the clubs belong to federations. And now, thanks to this law, the General Assemblies before the end of 2024, well, the clubs will vote. It's no longer the representatives of each region, but the clubs, all the clubs will vote, federation per federation. It's also a very interesting evolution. So we wait a few months before we can see the results of this evolution. But it's important to make sure that the federations evolve and the governance evolve, because we noted a long list of problems, and this is why I noticed, and this is what suggested, so we see a better governance.
Bonjour, je m'appelle.
Good afternoon, I'm Paul. I study at the high school Broy, and I wanted to know, do you think that politically unstable countries, or like countries like in conflict like Russia and Ukraine, can get back into the international events in the coming years?
Là, il y a une décision d'exclusion qui est, enfin non, Sophie, c'est peut-être mieux passé quoi.
A decision was made to exclude Russia. No, but Sophie, maybe you can answer this. Okay, so we should actually understand the framework. When it comes to the Olympic Games, Russia has violated the Charter. As long as these conditions are not met to reintegrate Russia, they will not be reintegrated. So they need to stop the annexion of various territories. As long as the specific point hasn't been solved, well, Russia will not be able to be reintegrated as a national Olympic committee and cannot come back in the world of the Olympic federations. But we are all the games. From another time, alternative games, for example, organized by Russia. So I think it's called BRICS games and the friendship games, I think, which will take place very soon. Well, Russia organizes these games. The friendly states organize or participate in these games with Russia. So obviously Russia will be integrated in these games.
Bonjour,
Good afternoon, my name is Enzo. I had a question for Mr. Thuram. I wanted to know when you started to realize the role of sport in the current context and in the fight to tackle discriminations.
En fait, je dis très souvent que
But I often say that is linked to my history of my life, because I became black when I was 9 years old, and I started to wonder what it means to be white, what it means to be black, and I have found books and I met athletes, and I realized that throughout history we always have black athletes, and they always try to break this line separating skin colors. We have the way facing segregation in the US, this clear distinction between white people and black people, and these athletes try to tackle and to challenge this segregation. And I consider that as a human being, I should work to tackle racism, and people started to ask questions about racism, and people say, would you to go to schools to talk about this? But if I were not football player probably would have the same question, so it's quite difficult to say that there were the specific moment when I started to ask myself questions on racism. And it's true that I keep on asking myself questions to get a better understanding of these topics. Yes, on the left side. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nicolas Chotard. I work at the CFA Agricultural College. I have a question for you, Mr. Thuram. I know you spent many years in Italy, but unfortunately, in Italy, the Italian championship is often considered racist. Do you now your sons are playing football there? Do they complain about racism too, or do you see maybe an improvement in the commitments of many clubs in Italy?
Alors, jeune homme, je tiens juste.
Okay, young man, let me say that racism that we face in football is linked to the racism we see in our society, and racism is linked to history. Societies, the French society, the Italian society, were based on a hierarchy of skin colors. And the expression of racism in football, you have the same hierarchy. And quite often, most players insulted on the pitch are black people. And this is not done randomly. Sometimes we do monkey screams, and this is because at the top we used to have white people, and black people were just barely better than monkeys, and that's what we were taught in France. And we need to understand this is cultural racism, just like homophobia and misogyny. So what is disturbing when we talk about racism in football, we get the feeling that football would be the most heavily impacted aspect of society. And we have politicians on TV, for example, they are racist. We have racist intellectuals. We have racist journalists. And that's what interesting. You shouldn't believe that racism, that football is the only place where you can find racism and where racism is really widespread. It is important to remember this, and each of us should say that we need to understand this so we can speak out and oppose racism. What was very interesting that I wanted to oppose racism, and pretty much everyone was telling me just forget about it, it's not that serious. And the managers were telling me the same thing, well, it's not important. And that's where the violence is, because you just have to be with it and try to consider as if it was nothing. And you understand at one point that you don't have an issue with this. The society has an issue, has a problem, even though if people want you to stop talking about it. But at the end of the day, we always end up saying that if there's a problem, that's because of the ones suffering from racism. But it didn't start with me. When I was much younger, we had a goalkeeper, his name was Joseph Antoine Bell. He was already insulted on the pitch in France. So it means that if it goes back as far as when I was young, it means that the federations, it's not their priority. And this is the priority. Reality is that people keep on playing. The important that football business has to continue, and each and every one of us, we need to understand that we have responsibility by speaking out. And let's not forget, there's no such thing as neutrality, because if you don't suffer from racism, well, people won't speak out. What will be interesting is how many white players oppose racism when it happens, and usually few of them, and almost no one actually oppose racism.
On a le temps pour une dernière question. Mademoiselle, allez-y.
I have enough time for a final question. Good afternoon, my name is Julie Alab, and I have a question for Mr. Boniface. During a TV show on TV5 and said that the Olympic Games are a big propaganda machine. Do you consider that this propaganda is beneficial if it's to promote peace, for example? Well, I actually didn't say that on TV5. That's the title. I had an interview on TV5 and I said it was a great communication campaign and everyone was in charge of organizing their own propaganda, and they decided to put the title of propaganda machine. It's not true, but what's certain is that each state tries to do some what we call nation branding and to show the best aspects of the country, and it's also based on propaganda. There's also something called sport washing, try to correct the reputation by with sport. And sometimes when you have a country with a bad reputation organize a sports event, well, actually mostly people talk about the bad reputation of the country. So unfortunately, yes, it was not. I was misquoted, and I'm sorry about this because we had a complete debate about this, and it truly demonstrates this. It's a good way to be united. It's not a magic brand, but it's not a good way to find a peace between Israel and Palestine, between Ukraine and Russia. But it's a fantastic way to open your eyes to the world and to open your arms to the others. And we have many other good benefits for the society and for public health. I think we can thank all our participants.
Et merci au public.
Thank you to the audience too.